If you are a refined connoisseur of gaming PCs, your feelings around the recent surge of miniature machines on YouTube could very well be that they suck. That you could build a full-size desktop for the same price that would kick the tiny computer's ass. That's certainly the case with a high-end $1,000 system. You're paying a big premium for the small form factor and cutting-edge APU, and that's not going to get you optimal gaming performance. Plus, those Strix Point Halo chips are clearly aimed at extracting money from AI bros before the bubble bursts, so of course they have obscene price tags. But what about something a bit more down to earth? Can a reasonably priced mini PC compete with a modern budget gaming rig? When GMKTec offered to send me their latest K12 Mini PC to review, I told them up front what I had in mind. I wanted to put a mini PC up against a regular desktop in both productivity and gaming benchmarks, knowing full well that the mini PC could probably lose. The K12 is a mid-range model priced at around £410 or about $550 US, so I put it up against an entry-level gaming PC that can be bought by just about anyone in the UK or US using all new components for around the same price. The mini PC is, of course, powered by a Ryzen APU with their Radeon integrated graphics, because while AMD aren't the only game in town, they are still the most popular. Honestly, I wasn't 100% sold on this one. This new model is called a Ryzen 7 H255, but if you dig a little deeper, it seems like AMD have gone and done an AMD. It's a rebranded Ryzen 7 8745HS, which itself is basically a 7840HS, a 65-ish watt 8-core Zen 4 chip with SMT and 16MB of L3 cache and a first-generation NPU. The integrated graphics are the same Radeon 780M you've seen 100 times before, and you can get a desktop version of this chip under the name 8700G. It's a good chip, but it's not a new one, and I kinda hate that AMD keep doing this. The Ryzen 7 8700G, and in fact the whole AM5 ecosystem, is too expensive for this project. I still wanted something modern with decent single-thread performance, so I opted for an Intel i3 14100F. The LGA 1700 platform might not be Intel's latest, but it has some good value options and an upgrade path, although it's a path that's got a few IEDs along the way. The K12 comes with 32GB of DDR5 5600 SODIMMs, which is the fastest currently available in this form factor, but not that fast overall. Memory speed directly affects the APU's gaming performance, so if faster modules ever become available, you do have that option. I've kitted out the desktop with DDR4 3200 because the graphics card I have lined up has its own memory, and while DDR5 might give the i3 a boost in some applications, it's not going to be enough to justify the extra expense. Onto the motherboard, and I have to confess, because I built this system with stuff I already had to hand, I've used a slightly overkill MSI Z690 Tomahawk. This is a higher tier model with a ton of expansion slots and I/O, but if you're fitting all this into a $550 budget, you're probably not going to get quite so much room for activities. For example, the cheapest LGA 1700 motherboard I can find in the US right now is the MSI Pro H610MG, which has a single NVMe slot for an SSD, whereas the K12 has 3. The MSI board does have 4 SATA ports for connecting legacy drives, and there's a spare PCIe X1 slot that could support an NVMe adapter at much slower speeds, but out of the box, I'd call that an advantage to the mini PC, especially for use as a miniature workstation or home server. On that note, the H610 board has only a single 1GB Ethernet port and no Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, compared to the dual 2.5GB jacks and the Wi-Fi 7 and BT 5.2 of the mini PC. Again, these are things you might get in a better motherboard if you can find a good deal on one, but on most mini PCs, these things are standard now. The same goes for USB-C. The MSI board has a handful of Type A ports of varying quality, and headers for a few more, but no Type C options at all. Throw in a 1TB SSD, a non-fire hazard PSU, and a cheapo case, and you've got most of the parts you need for a basic gaming PC for just £300 or about $400. All that leaves to get is a graphics card, and unfortunately on a £100 budget there's only a couple of relatively modern options. Of the ARC A310, GT 1030 and RX 6500 XT, I went for the least bad of them. I've reviewed the RX 6500 XT recently and, well, I didn't hide my feelings about it very well, but it definitely has the edge over the 780M. It has more cores and texture mapping units, and faster, dedicated memory. However, it does only have 4GB of the stuff, whereas the iGPU in the mini PC can be configured higher than this. You probably won't be playing games at high enough settings and resolutions for this to be a problem, but it does mean there are games that are simply off limits for the 6500 XT that aren't for the 780M, even if it does suck at them. In the US, you can get all of these parts for about $550, the same as the price of the K12. In the UK, you could get the whole shebang for the same £410 as the K12 costs over here. At one point, since I bought the 6500 XT, it has gone back up in price. As I don't have an A310 or GT 1030, and probably wouldn't want to use them even if I did, I've stretched the truth a little. Sorry. Depending on your use case, you could probably already pick a winner here. The desktop has worse I/O, no Wi-Fi, potentially less VRAM, only 2 display outputs, 4 cores, 8 threads, and even the smallest case is going to make it 10 times larger and probably 10 times uglier. Let's pretend none of that matters. Who'd have thought 10 years after its first PC release, I'd still be talking about GTA 5? Not me. I used to take the piss out of people for keeping this old thing in their benchmark roster, but the 2025 Enhanced Edition is keeping the most popular entertainment product of all time relevant. Or so I'm told. I've stuck to the minimum preset because the 6500 XT can't handle higher than this due to VRAM constraints. And it seems like the mini PC can't handle higher because of performance constraints. The Radeon 780M graphics are good for 69 frames per second, with fairly decent frame times. The gaming PC is almost 90% faster at these same settings, and is generally silky smooth. Sticking with easy-to-run games for a moment, Forza Horizon 5's built-in benchmark is a worst-case scenario for performance, and you'll see better numbers in normal gameplay. At 1080p high, the mini PC almost reaches 60 FPS in the benchmark, so it'll actually achieve higher frame rates most of the time. But if you want to guarantee 60, you might want to turn on FSR. The gaming PC, meanwhile, can achieve over 70 FPS and has lows over 60. Stepping up to something a bit heavier, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 needs dropping to medium to get a passable experience at 1080p on the mini PC. Without FSR upscaling, it still manages a 30 average with lows in the mid-20s. The gaming PC, meanwhile, is almost 50% faster at 44 FPS, with lows well over the 30 mark. I had to throw in a more brutal test, because it's 2025 and devs want to punish people for not having enough money. The Last of Us Part 2 is much closer between the two test machines, with the very low preset only delivering just either side of 30 FPS on each. However, this game can be very demanding on VRAM, and I've allocated 8GB to the mini PC's iGPU, whereas the desktop only has 4GB, so it's not too hard to turn the tables. At 1080 medium with FSR quality, the mini PC now achieves 32 FPS, while the gaming PC only hits 27, with notable frame time spikes along the way. Of course, low-spec machines are great for esports, and Counter-Strike 2 is one of my favourites right now. Unfortunately, benchmarking these things can be a bit unreliable and inaccurate, so I've done my best to give realistic numbers by playing full live deathmatch games in Dust 2 while counting the frames. At 1080 low with FSR turned off, the mini PC averages 128 FPS, while the desktop passes 200. The latter machine does suffer somewhat in 1% lows by comparison, but it still felt overall like a better experience. There we have it, your preconceptions are confirmed. The real gaming PC kicks ass in gaming, while the mini PC wins in being mini. The fact that it's this close is perhaps an indictment of the state of custom PCs in 2025, given how out of date the 6500 XT is and how terrible the other options are at the same price point. In fairness to the K12, it also does pretty exceptionally well in productivity compared to the desktop, but again, you could upgrade the i3 and it would then have the best of both worlds. The desktop could have up to an i9, if you're brave enough, can support 64GB of RAM, and will drive the biggest, most overpriced graphics card your PSU and case will accommodate. The mini PC can support more RAM and storage, but the CPU is a permanent fixture, and you're stuck with the integrated graphics, which is the main thing holding us back in games. Wait, that's not true, is it? We can upgrade the integrated graphics. The K12 has an Oculink port, which gives us 4 lanes of PCI Express. With a £30 adapter and a power supply, you could hook this thing up to a real desktop graphics card. What would happen if we gave both systems a GPU upgrade with a fairly humble RTX 4060? When sticking to the same minimum preset as before, GTA 5 hits what I believe to be an engine limit. Both GPUs are running at around 160 FPS, with small regular bumps in the frametime graph helping to bring the 1% lows down. Of course, you wouldn't buy an eGPU just to stay at low settings, so I switched to the very high RT preset, and despite the lower bandwidth, the mini PC actually wins by over 20%. It seems like this version of GTA 5 is making use of the K12's superior CPU. Forza, meanwhile, is very much not taking advantage of the 8-core Ryzen. The high preset goes up to 160 FPS on the i3, just barely showing signs of a CPU bottleneck, while the mini PC is only passing 120 FPS. Cranking up to maximum settings, including ray tracing, the mini PC is around the 75 FPS mark. Quite impressive, but still short of the 91 FPS of the desktop. The margin is far smaller in KCD2, amounting to less than 10% in the desktop's favour at 1080 medium. Pushing up to the Ultra preset doesn't change things much either, with the i3 scoring 64 FPS to the Ryzen 7's 60. As well as being memory intensive, The Last of Us Part 2 can also be heavy on the CPU, and this is devastating to the i3. At 1080p very low, it's unable to reach a 60 FPS average, putting it less than double the performance of the 6500 XT. The mini PC, despite the disadvantages of the Oculink interface, passes 90 FPS on average. Turning quality up to high is as far as we can go with an 8GB GPU without introducing VRAM issues, and the mini PC is still maintaining over 60 FPS, whereas performance on the i3 has barely moved an inch. Finally, Counter-Strike 2 once more finds in favour of the mini PC and its eGPU setup, averaging 232 FPS, while the i3 is only achieving just under 200. Actually a few frames below the previous benchmark, but that could be down to game-to-game variance, or maybe due to the Radeon GPU's lower driver overhead. Despite all of the positive results for the upgraded setup, I still don't think I can call the Mini PC the winner. The eGPU does wonders for gaming performance. However, it also undoes a lot of the best reasons for owning a Mini PC. It adds size and mess and complications to what should be a neat, simple experience. So while I could make the argument that this is actually a better gaming PC than a purpose-built rig, I don't think many people would seriously consider owning it. Plus, upgrade that desktop CPU, and this argument is pretty much void. By the way, I know a lot of people will be making the argument that I should have compared a used PC, which I thought about including, but it has too many variables in terms of price and availability. I will be upgrading an Alienware pre-built that should make for an interesting comparison to these two new systems, so keep an eye out for that next month. Despite my complaints about the branding of the APU, I have to admit that I struck lucky with the K12. Plenty of mini PCs at this price point don't have Oculink ports, and as I found out recently, using Thunderbolt 4 for external graphics is, by comparison, a train wreck. If you missed that video, it's on screen now. Thanks to GMKTec for providing the K12 for this video. Thanks for watching, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.